Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan, MSP. It's the Ukraine War Frontline Update for the 22nd of June 2023. Let's get straight to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. If you don't know those caveats, go and look at about 100 of my previous videos. They'll be there for you. What do they have to say? I like looking at the trends here. I'm going to look at the spreadsheet that Excel spreadsheet that Dell has done for us that details these figures over time, and we'll look at the trends that have been taking place and what's been going on the last couple of weeks in particular. I'm going to look at them in my extra video later today. So anyway, liquidated personnel is 650. Apart from that spike that we saw from the 300 dying around Piatikhatki and maybe the 170 at another base and so on and so forth, we've seen it around the 600 area during a lot of this counteroffensive, 500s and 600s. So that is part of the course. 7 tanks, 12 APVs, armored personnel vehicles. That is, again, fairly, I guess, average. Those numbers on a daily basis are going to bite, of course. 21 artillery systems, 2 multiple launcher rocket systems. That is a big number. The Ukrainians have been posting huge numbers of artillery losses for the Russians on a daily basis, and that is completely unsustainable. 550, I think, were lost in May, and there's going to be more in June, apparently. So that is, that will be well over 1,000 pieces of artillery lost in 2 months. Is just insane numbers. And while they might have some artillery to replace those pieces, again, as I keep saying, it will take time to get those artillery pieces in position and operational. And the question is, actually, do they have that? And do they have the artillery shells as well, given that they've had a number of huge hits to ammunition depots? We'll talk about that in a second. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, don't know the type of it. 1 helicopter. This is not a Ka-52 attack helicopter. This is it's a Mi family helicopter. I think Mi-14 was taken down yesterday. Don't know exactly where, but that's another hit, a huge hit for the Russians. Of course, it's the crew that goes down with them if they are lost as well. That could be the larger problem for the Russians. 10 drones, 11 vehicles and fuel tanks. That's less than there has been. Ukraine have been hitting not only ammunition dumps, but the trucks that get the ammunition and supplies out to the troops. That's been really significant. So here we have Putin saying, well, the Ukrainians have lost 245 tanks and 678 armored vehicles since the counteroffensive began. I mean, these are completely fanciful numbers. It's like 30% of Russian Ukrainian tanks or whatever, lost in just the opening weeks. It's just, he is plucking numbers out of his posterior. There's an awful lot of footage to defend these sorts of numbers. Like APCs, I'm pretty sure I could find 12 bits of footage of APCs lost for the Russians yesterday. Artillery systems, there's so much drone footage of artillery systems getting taken out, self-propelled guns, particularly in the Zaporizhia region. And here is a piece from someone with a call sign 13th. He is a Russian, I think he's a Russian fighter in the VDV. Russian terrorist Guzenko, aka 13th, commenting on Prigozhin's latest statement. I'll read you Prigozhin's statement later. It is really enlightening. Of course, you've got to take Prigozhin's claims with a pinch of salt, and we'll talk about that. It says Russians are indeed taking heavy losses on the front line. Without going into details, he parrots Prigozhin's sentiment on the current Russian command. What does he say? And this is really this is a damning indictment of the Russian situation at the moment. So if you're a pro-Russian voice in my threads going and trying to present your Russian narrative, it'd be interesting to see what you have to say to actual Russians saying this stuff. Right now, our fighters are suffering serious losses every day. 6 to 7 people die, today 4, and this is only in 1 airborne regiment. So this is, I presume, his regiment. Former prisoners died the other day. Out of 300, 6 survived. That's almost certainly what happened at Piatikhatki. And if you calculate the total losses in all units, then you simply won't believe in these numbers. Idiots who boost the photographs of hit leopards are fundamentally unaware of all that is happening now at the front. The process is underway. We are losing settlements. The fighting is taking place in difficult terrain, where the settlements defended are in the lowlands, and the enemy is using this superiority. Probably people will start to wake up only when they see that there are more and more portraits with mourning ribbons around, and most of the losses are the fault of the command, not the soldiers. The soldiers just complete their tasks, often at the cost of their own lives. These faces that every day tell you from TV that everything is going according to plan will not appear on the front line. The children of these same officials and sons-in-laws will not appear on the front. Ordinary guys, mobilized volunteers, contract soldiers, and former prisoners all die on the front, and they are the heroes with a capital H. So really damning sort of indictment of what's going on the front lines. Huge losses to the Russians are claimed by a Russian fighter, and then we'll come on to what Prigozhin says in a little while. Ukraine has shot down a Mi-24 helicopter that was taken down. As I say, it's the crews that are lost on board that are sometimes more problematic. Right, here is a really unfortunate situation for the Ukrainians, a little bit embarrassing. Footage has been released by Ukrainian soldiers, which shows a new angle of previously seen Russian drone footage from the Velika Novoselka front line, which showed a Ukrainian T-72 tank appearing to panic while attempting not to be struck by Lancet attack drones, resulting in it backing over and crushing the front of an international Max Pro MRAP. So the MRAP is possibly really badly damaged, possibly not. OSINT Defender here seems to think it's severely damaged, but actually others are saying, wow, it did a really good job of not getting crushed by a tank being on top of it. The T-72 and MRAP both appear to be in Ukrainian-controlled territory now, so it's likely that at least the tank will be recovered and redeployed, with the damage to the MRAP currently unknown but seeming to be severe. Footage claimed to be from near the Velika Novoselka front line in the southwestern Donetsk region shows the T-72 appearing to crush the Max Pro. As you can see here, there appears to be, Lancets. There might even, you can see the Lancet hitting there. So there's a bit of panic taking place. The tank is pushing the MRAP back, and then I don't know why. Is there anyone in the MRAP? Have they skedaddled? There are some people sort of running about. You see in this a little bit later. Then it's sort of, I don't know, it's panicking here. You get someone running out of the MRAP, a couple of people running out over to this other vehicle, and it mounts the MRAP. Maybe it's got stuck in reverse and doesn't know how to get out. But yeah, anyway, that's a tank on top of another vehicle. And then you can see there's stuff going on around, explosions. So, you can't blame people for panicking. You're in a war zone. It's pretty horrific. But that's a pretty unfortunate bit of footage. Overview of Ukrainian equipment losses added yesterday. This is Oryx visually confirmed losses. It's easy to look at the top line figures, right, and just think, okay, that number represents what was lost yesterday. But remember, these might be lost over the whole period of the war. It's just that footage gets to them then. So there's that to consider. There's also what type of equipment here. Here looks like quite a number of tanks for the Ukrainian. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11 tanks. There's quite a number of tanks. And then quite a number of MRAPs, really, those kind of vehicles. But also in this, you've got 5 drones as well. So when we look at the Russia, so that's 47 in total for the Ukrainians. When we look at the Russian losses, we have 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 tanks. So they've actually lost, at least according to Oryx, visually confirmed, slightly fewer tanks. Fairly, there's almost a parity there. But they've lost an awful lot of logistics trucks down here. But also 5. So you have 5 drones for the Ukrainians, 2 drones for the Russians here. So looking at those kind of differences, does that skew the data somewhat? Anyway, quite a lot of artillery, as you can see as well there. So just to say that there are going to be losses for both sides, of course. An unverified report of another Russian collection being decimated in occupied Zaporizhia today. So we saw Rykova was decimated itself, and that cooked off for 6 hours, and talked in my extra video yesterday about how that could have devastating consequences for the Russian defense over the next couple of weeks. You might see them really properly run out of shells as a result of so many of them going up, and we're seeing all these vehicles getting hit as well, both in the totals in the general staff figures, but also, as you've just seen in the figures here for Oryx, with a number of trucks being taken out, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13 trucks there. It's difficult to get equipment around and supplies. It's said that the village of Rozivka near Polohi, missiles wiped out an ammunition depot, trucks and soldiers. Secondary explosions lasted a long time, say witnesses. So that could be another real problem for the Russian defenses. 2 powerful explosions were heard in Sevastopol. Locals report. It's reported that near the Aquamarine Hotel, something was shot down after the air defense was active. Don't know any more details than that. Several explosions reported in Melitopol. Also in Azovska, near Berdyansk, a Russian base was hit. The base was located at a former recreational center, Troyenda, on the coastline. You've seen this quite a lot, where the Russians are moving into hotels and whatnot. But even then, the hotels are often single buildings or just a few buildings. So they're also moving into recreational complexes where you've got lots of huts and you can spread your troops around. But again, those are being hit as well. And this is a fairly significant bit of news. So there are three entrances to Crimea. So you've got on the left-hand side, if you like, on the west, you have the Perekop Isthmus. That's a land connection. Then in the middle, you've got Shonhar, or slightly over to the east, you've got Chonhar, which looks a bit like an isthmus, but it's still actually connected by bridges. And then you've got over at Henichesk, connecting the Arabat Spit, you have a bridge there. Now, a bridge at Chonhar was hit yesterday. And this is, or possibly this morning, I'm not sure, or overnight. But the imagery is coming out now, and it is actually quite significant. It's quite a significant bit of damage to that bridge. However, there are differing claims about this bridge. So quite a lot of people reporting this as really bad for the Russians logistically and whatnot. And you've got holes right the way through here that you can see the water below, and potential weakness to the structure, so on and so forth. It's been hit, right? But then Tim White's saying here, the video shows Ukraine has hit an older, almost unused bridge across the Sivash. So I don't know if that's the case, but whatever is happening, whether this is it doesn't look like it's a particularly used bridge. It doesn't have any guardrails across it particularly. So I would imagine this is starting to shape things to do with Crimea a little bit more explicitly, and I think that's what it tells you, which I think is pretty significant. Okay, let's have a look at the front line really quickly. Squadron leader of the 3rd Assault Company for the 24th Separate Assault IDAR Battalion, goes by the call sign of Osman, says in the direction of Torska, which is to the west of Crimea, where you've got the forest and then you've got Torska. The Russians appear to be on the attack around there and just north of Crimea. So the Crimea front seems to be the Russians on the offensive. He says the situation is difficult using tanks, artillery, aviation, high precision missiles and infantry. The Russians have pushed through the old demarcation line. With losses, our forces managed to fend off enemy assaults and not let them pass any further, but the barrage of fire was hellish. So not a good look for the Ukrainians there. The Russians are putting a lot of pressure on. But just south of the forest in the Bilohorivka area, in the Luhansk region still, the armed forces of Ukraine carried out a successful offensive set of actions. They are entrenched on the occupied borders, the Deputy Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has said. So Bilohorivka there, Ukrainians are pushing back. We've got the Ukrainians pushing back north of Mariinka, between Mariinka and Krasnohorivka. So a little bit of a counterattack there, potentially. And then Prigozhin has said this, but remember, he's got an agenda. Take everything he says with a block of salt, possibly. However, what's interesting is if you're a pro-Russian voice and you laud Prigozhin and what Wagner have done. Say, look at what Wagner have done. They've done well in Bakhmut and whatnot. Then actually, you can't, on the one hand, laud what Prigozhin does and says over there, and then over here says, "Oh, he's not talking the truth. He's got an agenda, and he's against the Russian MOD." So, like, either he is lying, and then that devalues him as anything he says, I guess, or he's telling the truth, and the Russian MOD are lying, right? And I would say here there's probably some really significant elements of truth to what he says. So amongst what he says is that Piaty-Khatki is under Ukrainian control, Robotyne, the northern part, is under Ukrainian control, and Uryzhina is under Ukrainian control. That would show advances for the Ukrainians. There's all this argument over who controls Piaty-Khatki. The Russians are saying that they've counterattacked it. It seems to have swapped hands like a million times. Prigozhin here says, well, let's go through what he says. So he's pretty angry. I'll turn his sound off so that that anger doesn't infect you. I cannot comment in any way on how the counteroffensive is going for the Ukrainians. I can say what is happening with us today at the contact line. He says, enemy is occupying Piaty-Khatki, enemy is occupying the northern part of Robotyne, enemy is occupying Uryzhina. It says that huge pieces of land were given to the enemy. He continues, next in the village of Sadove above Tokmak, the enemy is there, and pray to God it's a single group of 50 to 100 people. But there, there is no management, no weapons, no ammo. Soldiers are writing letters every day that they need shells, they need anti-tank measures, grenades, and armor-piercing rounds. So this might talk to the effects of taking out those ammunition dumps. So our world is split into two realities again. In one place, away from everyone, so that not one military reporter could get there. All information is blocked, and the enemy is moving towards the Molochny Liman. If he reaches the Molochny Liman, then all territories taken during the so-called SMO will be returned by the enemy. The enemy is starting to cross the Dnieper. This is an interesting bit of rumor, I guess, or a claim from Prigozhin. In Holopristan, first sabotage groups are appearing, and from today, regular forces as well. So he's claiming regular forces across the Dnieper. All this is hidden from everyone completely. Russia will one day wake up to find that that Crimea is now with Ukraine. There's a direct portrayal of the Russian Federation's interests. All this is happening against a backdrop of losses. Troops must be replenished. A soldier cannot fight alone, cannot fight when the unit is missing 50 to 60% personnel. He cannot withstand alone at a line where 2 or 3 should be. It's just hugely damning claims here. All these numbers are meticulously hidden. All that the leadership of the SMO is doing today is hiding facts in order to give back to Moscow nice looking reports. And it's one thing that they use to deceive the supreme commander, but they're also being used to deceive the Russian people. If it goes on, we will remain without the most important thing, without Russia. Yesterday, on the 20th of June, there was an assembly in the Ministry of Defense where two main issues were looked at. The Army Expo 2023, of which the main organisers are the wife and daughter of Shoigu, as well as the Maritime Parade. He says, to run a maritime parade, you need to get the Moskva from the bottom of the Black Sea. So that's the Russian flagship, that was sunk, which these scumbags have shamefully sunk together with Russian sailors. This is how the Ukrainian offensive is going as of today. And who is applauding it? The next question is, what is the cost of this SMO? The cost is a total destruction of the army. What for? For some moron to receive, I mean, this is really damning this, the Marshal's Star, for his family members to be untouchable, for him to paint himself and other con men on frescoes of the Ministry of Defense Cathedral. The Ukrainian counteroffensive is bringing us serious losses and problems which are hushed up, which the Russian people don't know about. When the trouble comes, I'll repeat, we may remain without an army and without Russia. So either you take this seriously as a Russian or you don't. But he is saying that the Russian army is existentially in threat going forward. And I would agree. I'd say it's already been basically rendered impotent. If you're international and looking on, whether you're considering getting involved in a war that involves Russia, I mean, take some of the Caucasus. Now's your time to take that opportunity, strike while the iron is hot. And the Russian armed forces are in no position really to do anything significant to support or repel forces around the Caucasus and so on and so forth. So yeah, anyway, that's what Prigozhin says. Make of that what you will. Velika Novosilka Axis, Prigozhin, in the previously shared audio message, also claims that Ukrainian troops have taken the village of Urzhine. This is unconfirmed and a rumor for now. Ukrainian forces attack north of Pryutne to flank Rivnopil as Ukrainian forces face stiff resistance. So this is talking about the Velika Novosilka salient. They're pushing down. They might have taken Urzhine. Don't know about Staromayorsk, and don't really know about Rivnopil at the moment, and perhaps onto Pryutne as well. But that's fairly similar to yesterday. This source says that Ukraine has liberated another 8 kilometers west of Makarivka. So this is to say all of this area here is now being sort of liberated. And that's in the Donetsk area. And then we move further to the west in the Vasilivka axis. So the Vasilivka is this major town on the edge of the reservoir, just southwest or south of Kamyanska and southwest of Pyatikhatki. Russian attacks The forest area west of Piatichatki, again, still, I mean, they seem to have been fighting over that forest now for about 3 days. Reporting from Ukraine does a whole video on that bit of forest. Prigozhin said in an audio message that north of Robotyne, Ukrainians have made significant territorial gains, probably in the blue outlined area, unconfirmed. So that there might be some gains to Ukrainians there. There is information from several sources from our military that in the direction of Oryx and Vasilivka, our soldiers captured many Russians. If true, that's great news. So that's in the area we're just talking about. And both Russian and Ukrainian sources note that Russian troops are currently counterattacking the forest strip west of Piatichatki. So far, no changes on the map have been reported. Just I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but that it will be an equipment and human graveyard, I think, possibly, for both sides to some significant degree. But it seems like slightly more for the Russians. I think it's not to say it's a Vuhledar 2.0, but it's interesting. I'm trying to work out why would they continue to do things like that. They're really trying to counterattack certain areas a lot, rather than sit back and soak up the Ukrainian attacks in a defensive mode. They're going on the attack, which would, I think, attrit their own forces more. And I'm just trying to work out what the wisdom of that is. They are defending by attacking. Yeah, I can see that could work, but it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you, I think, more than it would the Ukrainians. So if you're going to throw in mechanized equipment down the same roads again and again, they're going to get hit. Okay, moving on to other things, odds and ends here, odds and sods. Concentration camps in the Donetsk region. Now it's official. Gauleiter Pushilin issued an order on the de facto creation of camps for the detention of everyone who is not a citizen of the so-called DPR or Russia, said Petro Andriushenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol. And this is absolutely insane. This is, Nazism 2.0. This is Nazi Germany again, on the way to being. Just quite incredible. Thomas C. Tyner says one of the exploitation brigades of the Ukrainian offensive is still at the training ground. Most still are. The time to deploy them hasn't arrived yet. What he's saying here is that, do you know what? We're not fully in a counteroffensive yet because they're still training some of these troops that are going to be utilized in the main counteroffensive thrust. So that's not, it ain't happening yet. It would be why he's saying that. I guess we shall see. Military aid, right? We can't do anything. Ukrainian pilots beg for F-16s, says CNN. This is a quote from a Su-25 pilot. We are losing a lot of aircraft due to Russian Su-35 interceptors. When you see a colleague's explosion in front of your eyes in real time, it's a shock. Yeah, and there seems to be this delay on F-16s. I don't know. I mean, Zelensky's talking about them starting training in August. I don't understand why it's starting in August and not now. Unless this is one of the classic, oh yeah, they're going to start in August. Actually, they've been training for a month already. There could well be an element of trying to throw Russia off the scent here, trying to confuse people with mixed messages, but things are actually happening behind the scene. There is a high probability of that being the case. Here we have a new coalition of Western countries is eyeing Romania as a possible location to train Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16 fighter jets, according to the people with knowledge of the effort. This is arguably pretty significant news. The US House Committee backed a bipartisan resolution calling for the Biden administration to immediately provide Ukraine with ATACMS missiles. This became known at a committee meeting held on Wednesday. ATACMS have a range of 190 miles, which allow Ukrainian forces to strike the territories held by the Russians, says the head of the committee. Now, this is a committee, so it will be interesting to see where this goes and whether it will be actions. And someone talked about this on my threads. There might well be a reason that ATACMS have not been given, right? And I've talked about this in previous videos. It might be that they're just not the right munition for what Ukraine want. And I know some people see them as this panacea, but it could be that they're actually quite easy to take down with air defenses. It could be that you can do a better job with Storm Shadow cruise missiles than with these. There might be that the US don't have enough of them. It might be X, Y, and Z. So that these haven't been given, there could be good rationale behind that. So pressure from politicians to say we should give them might run against what the military have in mind and why they haven't been given. Um, Okay, Bulgaria is preparing a new package of military aid to Ukraine, according to the defense minister. The new aid to be sent will consist of weapons and ammunition that is already available in Bulgarian warehouses and should be replaced anyway. This is kind of like drawdown type thinking where they've got this stuff. It's going to be replaced. Might as well give it to Ukraine. And actually, quite often with Bulgaria, particularly, it will be Soviet era munitions that ordnance that can be used and is really needed by the Ukrainian, can be used straight away. German military aid to Ukraine updated with delivery of a bunch of stuff, and they've also pledged some Volcano 155 mil ammunition. So they've sent over a couple of semi trailers, border protection vehicles, 1,000 rounds of 155 artillery ammunition, so a few bits and pieces there. Latvia will transfer 4 Mi-17 helicopters to Ukraine. Now, this actually is all of its helicopters and Stinger air defense systems are going to Ukraine. Literally everything is like, and this is the kind of rationale I really agree with, which is, well, we've got this stuff in case we go to war with Russia. You're at war with Russia, and you're kind of doing this work on our behalf. So you have everything. Here you go and use it. Yeah, I think that's pretty sensible. So there's been this conference in London that has seen a lot of the leaders from around the world come, a lot of representatives to talk about the reconstruction of Ukraine, presumably after the war, but kind of now as well. There have been an awful lot of pledges and things coming out of this. Has been super useful. So let's go through some of them. World Bank to provide 1.75 billion dollars in aid to restore Ukraine. Announced a new funding package yesterday. The US has signed a $1.1 billion contract with Raytheon Defense Company for the production. Oh, this was supposed to be earlier. Sorry, before this. Got it in the wrong order. Anyway, I'll say it anyway. The US has signed a $1.1 billion contract with Raytheon Defense Company for the production of AIM-120 AMRAAM. So these are air-to-air missiles. The missiles will be transferred in particular to Ukraine, says the Pentagon. Then we're getting on to the stuff that's been announced. Sorry, US will allocate 1.3 billion in financial aid to Ukraine. US Secretary of State Blinken announced at the conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine, $520 million to help Ukraine overhaul its energy grid, $657 million to help modernize the border crossing points, its railway lines, ports, and other critical infrastructure. Ukraine will receive weapons for victory and 381 million euros from Germany, said the head of the German Foreign Ministry at the Conference of Reconstruction of Ukraine. France is preparing a multi-year support plan along with an additional 40 million euros. So it is a support plan and 40 million euros, as announced by Catherine Colonna, France's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The support will focus on urgent reconstruction, medical equipment, and preparations for the upcoming winter. Australian businessman, I love this, and I've reported on him doing something previously as well. I'm sure it's the same guy. Australian businessman to invest $500 million in the Ukraine Development Fund. Andrew Forrest, what a legend. The second richest Australian, and I wonder what the first richest Australian is doing, announced on June the 21st that he would be seeding the Ukraine Development Fund with $500 million and called on other investors to follow suit. Brilliant. Modernized. So that's the aid that's going to Ukraine, and there'll be more on top of that. That's just kind of headline stuff from the reconstruction conference. Now let's look at a few bits going towards Ukraine from Russia's point of view. Modernize Russian T-80 BVMs and T-72 B3M tanks at the railway station in Kamensk-Shaktinsky, Rostov Oblast in Russia. I wonder where these are coming from. I presume these have been upgraded and built in Russia, those factories, or hauled out of storage and upgraded. because you wonder why they're building these and not the most modern, like T90s, for example. But anyway, that there's video of that as well. I don't know where the video's gone, but yeah. So there is a train load of Russian, or a couple of trains actually. That's on 2 tracks there, I think. But yeah, so they are getting some new equipment themselves. But still, it's the question I always ask, like I tell you, is when I see a bit of aid given to Ukraine, even if it's so here we're talking about 4 helicopters, a bunch of Stinger, and then all this stuff there. What is Russia getting? Every time you see Ukraine is being given anything, what is Russia getting? And that's the same with all this financial aid. We talked yesterday about how Russia are in financial on the financial precipice, arguably. Ukraine are being given many billions of dollars of assistance, really tangible assistance by many countries around the world. What is Russia getting? And when it does get aid from China, it appears like there are some serious strings attached. Not saying there aren't strings attached when Ukraine gets aid, but Vladivostok port on the eastern seaboard of Russia, suddenly Chinese have access to that now. Interesting. So when China help out Russia, uh, Russia help themselves to a little bit of China help themselves to a little bit of Russia. Words. Yeah, there are huge differences to the sorts of aid that both countries are getting. Okay, and the amount. Right, geopolitically speaking, Bloomberg, the EU estimates it can't legally confiscate frozen Russian assets. I've talked about there's a whole bunch. I said that the UK has not been liquidating frozen Russian assets, and that's because they think they would be seriously legally challenged. Well, here the EU has assessed that it can't legally confiscate outright frozen Russian assets and focuses on using those assets temporarily instead. Interesting. So it looks like the UK their position might have been quite prescient there. In addition, transportation of oil via, this is a couple of points. Let's go back to the first one. Actually, EU is to ban oil transportation via the Druzhba pipeline. Polish ambassador to the EU has said. It's known that the 11th package of the EU anti-Russian sanctions will also include a ban on Russian trailers crossing the border. In addition, transportation of oil via the northern branch of the Druzhba oil pipeline, which runs through Belarus to Poland and Germany, will be banned. It should be noted that now this is the only branch of the pipeline through which Russian oil goes to Europe. That's really significant. And yeah, may that happen as soon as possible, I guess. And finally, NATO allies are backing fast-track membership for Ukraine. So this is James Cleverly, Foreign Minister in the UK, Foreign Secretary, saying that NATO. He's advocating NATO joining quickly. There's all this conversation about can they join quickly? Should they join quickly? What about all these other nations that are wanting to join on a waiting list? Is it unfair for them if Ukraine just kind of leapfrog them? All these different conversations going on. But there are still people like France's position has shifted from what Sarkozy used to think when he was the premier there. Now you've got Macron changing the French posture with regard to Ukraine being able to join NATO. They're up for that. UK is definitely behind it. We'll see what happens. They've been invited to the Vilnius summit, NATO summit. I think they were waiting for an invite. I didn't know whether they've officially got it. Let's talk about them having it yesterday. I don't know. Zelensky says he will go if he gets like some rock solid guarantees. That's what I understand at the moment. So they'll be going through all that at the moment. We'll see where that ends up. Anyway, thank you. That's today's news piece. Sorry, you noted I had to like stop things lots. There are people working in my garden because I'm not physically able to do some of the things I would like to do due to my MS. So I had to get someone to do these tall hedges in my relatively small garden, but it still has hedges that need cutting. Otherwise the neighbours get annoyed. So that's why I had to keep stopping the video. Apologies about that. And my glasses were black as I come back in from the sunshine. Anyway, you don't need to know that. That's today's news piece. Please like, subscribe and share. And thank you for all your support. And I'll speak to you in a Frontline update soon.